Alrighty, welcome to the 81st edition of Before the Battle. My name is Nick Baldwin of BloodyElbow.com, and joining me, as always, is MMAfighting.com's own Jed Meshew, and back this week, MMAsucker.com's Wes Riddle. Jed, first off, how are you?
I'm doing excellent, good sir. How are you?
Not too bad. Wes, it has been a little while. You were not here last week for Volkov Struve. You were not here the week before for the Bellator and Mac. You were here for Pettis Moreno, but that was a month ago. It's been a little bit. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I guess with the month layoff pretty much that we had from the UFC, kind of put a distance on things. And then also with the Bellator card, I was getting moved back to campus. Last week with Pettis Moreno, I had a family emergency that I had to go to.
You can be honest. You can be honest. It was just that it was a Bellator card and that nobody really gave a fuck.
It was a Bellator card, but I did have somewhere to be that night. And I think the time that we were going to do or plan on doing the before the battle, but even if I probably was available, I probably would have lied. So
that's right. We know. You're not as committed. It's okay.
I do enjoy Bellator, but for me, I just kind of like to sit back and watch. I don't really input on picks and stuff for that, but maybe someday.
And Mac was stupid, so you were on our side for that. Well, Jed, UFC Fight Night 114 went down this past weekend, I believe. Yeah, I guess it already was a week ago. It feels like that fight happened. What's that?
Wasn't it 115?
115. What did I say? No. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't care. It happened this past weekend. Volkov defeats Struve, third round TKO. Pretty entertaining fight. What do you got for us? Results for our picks, for DraftKings, and for bonuses. Who comes out the champs?
Well, let it be known, you in fact said 114. It was 115. 2, let it also be known, we gave him props on air, previously, despite the fact that Wes Riddle's been gone for a while, been on a bit of a heater, so congrats on that. And his heater kept right on chugging through last weekend, despite him not being here. He still managed to turn in the optimal picking record. Is that right? He did. He won our picks contest. Well, he split a win with you, Nicholas. You both went 10-2. Wes missed on Holbrook. We all missed on Holbrook. Who the fuck knew that was going to happen? And Wes also picked Wilkinson in the co-main event. Obviously, Baharazad ended up getting that exciting KO win. Nicholas, you missed on Holbrook. You picked Baharazad in the co-main event, but you also picked Brian Barberena against all forms of logic and reason, who was soundly defeated by Leon Edwards.
Yes, and the big fuck you goes out to you for for tempting me to pick to Barberena. But
well, you're I like to think of that you're your own man, and you can just make your own decisions without or in the face of peer pressure. Apparently that's not right, but whatever. You take home a draw with Wes Riddle. I turned in a extremely mediocre 8-4 card, so I'm bringing up the rear on the picks. As far as our DraftKings, though, man, the DraftKings contest, I really turned the franchise around and still came up just a little bit short. Nicholas is our winner on DraftKings with the 473 points. Your big point earners were Przerhas, Taisimov, and Alexander Volkov. All three of those scoring over 100 points. The rest of your team didn't put up a great level of points in general, but, you got a 53, a 29, a 32. Generally solid point totals. Wesley Riddle bringing up the rear with 363 points. Just not optimal, but it's okay. I guess we'll give him a pass on that, considering he did so well in the picks. Just couldn't quite translate that to DraftKings. And then I, just a few points shy of yours, Nicholas, with 458 points. My big producers were the same as yours because you and I had basically the exact same picks, but I picked Bohan Velikovic. You picked Brian Barberena. The difference there was the difference in our scorecards. Bohan Velikovic should have been kicking those legs a little bit more. Maybe I would have been the winner. But so we have it. To round out all our predictions, we actually didn't do that bad this time, guys. Usually our predictions for post-fight bonuses are, let's go with not great as a charitable definition, but all of us hit some winners this time around. Nicholas, you called Mairbek Taisimov as a performance of the night bonus winner. That was in fact correct. Your performance of the night bonus winners were Taisimov and Zabit. Magomed Shipper, the man of many names. I also I picked Rakic and Mihailovic as my performance bonuses. Neither of those got there, but I did predict the fight of the night correctly. Volkov Struve was the fight of the night. Also, Wes Riddle crushing it this week outside of DraftKings. He predicted Volkov Struve as fight of the night correctly, and also picked Mairbek Taisimov to get a performance of the night bonus. And so he wins our predictions on the bonuses. Rounding out his pick was Rakic. You also had Rakic, Nick, for your performance bonuses. Clearly that didn't pan out for you, but not a bad showing from us all told last week. So let's see if we can keep that going.
Yeah, and especially from me and Wes. I mean, you not so much. I mean, I won DraftKings. Me and Wes tied picks, and Wes won bonuses. I don't see you at the top anywhere, Jed.
I mean, I'm just trying to let y'all catch up. I've got a pretty hefty lead in our predictions so far, so I'm just trying to make it even, make it a contest.
Makes sense. All right. Well, thanks for being so generous. I'm not going to be generous now that Wes and I are at the top. I will not let you catch up, but or that's what I think. Anyways, let's see. UFC 215 goes down from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada tonight, September 9th. This is a Saturday. It's going to be a fun card, but the main event was canceled 2 days ago. Yeah, 2 days ago. Demetrius Johnson versus Ray Borg for the UFC flyweight title. History-making 11 titles of defense for Mighty Mouse. Scratch from the card. No longer on the card, no longer happening. Might be rescheduled, but we don't know for sure. Ray Borg pulled out with an illness. UFC confirmed it was a viral infection or illness, whatever you want to call it. According to Borg's now former nutrition company, Perfecting Athletes, it was not rate-related. I know Ariel Helwani's sources said the same thing, but with Borg having a history of not making weight and having a tough weight cut, it seems a bit hard to believe that. But, you know, take it for what it's worth. Got to give the fighter the benefit of the doubt, in my opinion. But still very disappointing that that Borg Johnson is not happening. Although not many people cared about this fight because it's just, you know, Johnson doing what Demetrius Johnson does for the most part. But I enjoyed DJ. I enjoyed DJ a lot, and I'm disappointed. Jed, what do you make of all this? And Wes, give your thoughts after Jed does.
I make of all this that it's slightly unfortunate because I always enjoy watching Demetrius Johnson fight. I like Ray Borg and think Ray Borg is probably a little too green for this test at this point in time, but could have been an interesting challenger later on down the line. But that's sort of the nature of being a dominant champion. You sort of one of the benefits of being extremely dominant. You get to fight fighters before they maybe get to their peak, because if you clean out a division, they're going to start rushing people to title shots. So all credit to, I think the fight would have been fun. I know Brandon Gibson was very excited about Ray Borg's opportunity here. It sounds like they're going to do a quick turnaround, put this on UFC 216, which currently has an interim lightweight title fight that I'm not sure is going to do any type of draw for them at all. Between Tony Ferguson and Kevin Lee. Basically, I just don't know that people give two shits about Tony Ferguson, and I know people don't give a shit about Kevin Lee. So I don't, we all know DJ is not a huge draw here, but maybe two title fights can beef up the card a little bit, pull some better numbers there. I think that that's completely reasonable and fine to do that. On the missing weight tip, I had a lively discussion with my colleague at MMA Fighting over the past couple of days, Mark Ramondi, about this. I tend to believe that this is not actually weight related. And by tend to believe, I mean, I've heard some things that I'm not going to repeat because they're unsubstantiated or off the record stuff. It really seems like Ariel's reporting that this was not weight related is 100% on the money. And so when I say that, I want to be clear, because some people have brought up the argument that, well, even if he got independently sick, cutting weight didn't help him. Sure, yeah, cutting weight probably doesn't help you recover from an illness. But in my mind, I don't think we should be bitching about, oh, he got sick because he's cutting weight, if that's not the case. Like, if this is I was trying to cut weight and my kidneys failed and that's why I got sick and went to the hospital, then okay. Like, you can totally lambast him for it, knock him for it. But if it's I got a viral infection a week ago and I haven't been able to shake it, and the weight cutting, I wasn't able to recover, then I think that we all should kind of just shut up. And it's just one of those things that, like, sometimes shit happens and sometimes there are unfortunate circumstances. And this is one of them. And again, it's not like we lost a fight that many people were super pumped on. So I super am willing to just be like, oh, whatever, let it go. We'll come back to this in a month and see what happens. So that's my take. I'm still excited about the card because I was excited the last time this fight was supposed to happen. For my money, Shevchenko, Nunes is probably the best fight you can put in women's mixed martial arts right now, other than Shevchenko.
Jędrzejczyk.
Yeah, Jędrzejczyk. There you go. I think that it's sensational, and I cannot wait for that. So I'm still pumped about the card. I also think this card is underrated. I don't think it's great. I don't think it's an amazing card. I think if this card was on free TV, it would be maybe the best card ever put on free TV, though. It's pretty deep, a lot of interesting matchups, a lot of guys with some sort of a name. So I think it's a really good fight card. And if you're a hardcore fan, you're probably pretty interested in this one.
Well, and when JDS and Nagano and DJ Borg was still on the card, people were even then saying, oh, it's not, fantastic. Maybe that was actually before. I feel like one of the main card fights got added kind of late. It might have been Magny RDA. I think that's it. But either way, still a good card. Wes, feel free to add anything else onto what Jed said.
I don't really have a whole lot more to add. I like Ray Borg quite a bit. I feel unfortunate for him that he had to pull out from this fight. I think he's got a lot of talent and a lot of abilities that's going to get him far in his future because he's still very young, not only in his mixed martial arts career, but his age. He's only 24, and he's been able to put together quite a bit of impressive UFC victories. He does have 2 losses. One was Justin Scoggins, and one I think was his UFC debut. But Ray Borg definitely has a big future ahead of him. I don't think it played a factor in this one because, we haven't really heard anything, and Jed talked about it, but the weight seems to be one thing that has affected Borg in the past, and that's one thing I don't know how it's going to affect him in the future as he gets older in age. But it's really unfortunate, but you know what? It's the business. That's what's going to happen sometimes. You're going to come down with illnesses here and there. I feel for Demetrius Johnson because I know he was really wanting this fight and to be able to break that record for title defenses. But his time will come at some point. I don't know what their plans are going to be regarding the UFC as to what they're going to do with this fight. If they're going to plan it again, have Demetrius Johnson and Ray Borg fight in the future, maybe on like a Fox card, which I think would do a lot better in terms of viewership than it would if that was a main event for this, like a pay-per-view like this. But I don't know if that's what they're going to do, or if they're going to try to get TJ in there to fight Demetrius now since Ray Borg got sick and maybe he lost a little bit of stock value in their eyes. Maybe they want to pair up Ray Borg in like a title eliminator with Sergio Pettis. Just an idea out there, but that would kill off a contender. Just a couple different ideas I feel like they could do, but we're going to kind of have to see what their choices are or what choice they're going to go with. So, again, it's unfortunate. I do agree with Jed. I think this is a pretty sneaky, underrated card. I think there's some good fights that could produce some shock value. And I will be watching this card tonight. I'm very interested in a few of these fights. But overall, kind of bummed about the main event. I'm a big Demetrius Johnson fan, and I've always enjoyed watching Ray Borg fight. He's somebody that I look up to because he's just a little bit older than me, and I feel like I can relate to him in some ways. But then again, still a great main event with Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko.
Alrighty, let's get into this card. UFC 215, as I said, goes down tonight, kicking things off on Fight Pass. Early prelim, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, will be a lightweight fight between Cajun Johnson and Adriano Martins. Martins, of course, a huge favorite. He opened not too big of a favorite, right around 2-1 or so, but right now or since then, bettors have bumped him up all the way to about 4.5 to 5-1. So Cajun Johnson hasn't fought for 2 years. Him having underdog status definitely makes sense. Whether or not this is too wide of odds is we'll see. Jed walking through the fight, Raging Cajun Johnson, Adriano Martins. Who's the pick?
I'm taking Adriano Martins. I just think this is borderline horrific style matchup for Cajun Johnson. I'm just not sure what he's going to do here to win the fight. Like, if either of y'all are picking Cajun Johnson or could elucidate how his avenues to victory here, feel free to clue me in. But Adriano Martins hits really hard, is a very good athlete, and is like a solid competitor with a lot of international success. And by solid, I mean like he was a really good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu player on the international scene. So I'm not sure how Cajun Johnson, who kind of mostly does his most effective stuff with getting takedowns and working over on top, like I don't think he's going to be able to get a lot of takedowns on Adriano Martins, who is borderline outstanding defensive wrestler. He's he's not outstanding, he's a very good defensive wrestler. Can offensively grapple and wrestle as well. I think Adriano Martins might be able to get takedowns if he so chooses to do so. I don't think he really will. I think he'll just mostly try and keep it on the feet. If somehow Cajun Johnson starts shooting in on him a lot, trying to get him down, I think Martins' jiu-jitsu background creates a whole world of problems for him there. Like it's just fucking dangerous to do against that. And then on the feet, I think Cajun Johnson doesn't really have excellent defense. He kind of drops his hands a lot when he starts striking, and I sort of expect Adriano Martins to just plunk him. Basically, Cajun Johnson got knocked out by Tai Hyung Bang. I think Adriano Martins can do the same thing. I sort of expect the fight to look a little bit like the Martins-Makhachev fight. And I think Adriano Martins is going to get a knockout in the first 10 minutes. So I'll say a second round KO for Adriano Martins.
I agree with you. I do think that this is somewhat of a match-making kind of iffy fight. I don't really see where they're going with it a whole lot. Maybe it's the fact that Cajun Johnson's had some issues with Reebok recently. Don't know a whole lot about that, but they're pairing up Adriano Martins. Go ahead.
I was saying could be that they're just trying to
fuck him up. That's once I heard this matchup, I was like, I don't know. Cajun's been talking some smack. Maybe they're trying to get him a fight that they know he's going to lose. But because then again, Cajun hasn't fought since 2015, and they're pairing him up against a guy who knocked out Islam Makhachev and beat Khabilov, a debatable split decision to Leonardo Santos. So I don't really know where they're going with this, but Adriano Martins is a very well-rounded fighter. He's got powerful hands, a very good and technical boxer. But then again, he's really good with jiu-jitsu, as he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. And Cajun Johnson really struggles on the feet sometimes in his fights. And you mentioned it, a lot of his fights are won by on the ground. I do think Adriano Martins is just a better athlete in this one, and I think he's going to be able to get a stoppage. So I've got Adriano Martins picked by a second-round stoppage as well by strikes.
Yeah, I was going in, to the show thinking Martins is for sure going to win. The line makes some sense at the very least. He should be a big favorite, going to win the fight. Initially, though, I was thinking decision. I figured Cajun might be tough enough, but the main reason I was thinking that is because Adriano Martins, when he shows up, he's one of the better lightweights on the planet, but he doesn't always show up. We saw that in the Leo Santos fight, and I know Santos is underrated himself, so Santos is a very tricky and good fighter, so that played into that fight as well, I would think, but Martins can at times just not do much. He can just show up very flat-footed, very inactive, and either win a split decision or lose a split decision. He sometimes puts on very lackluster showings, and if he shows up like that, Cajun still probably wouldn't win because Martins is still so technically superior, but it definitely would limit Martins' chances of getting a knockout. But I thought about it and figured, okay, Leo Santos is much better than Cajun Johnson. In general, when Martins is fighting a lower level competition, he gets an impressive showing. whether that's a knockout or a impressive decision. When it's a tougher fight, tougher competition, then that's when we see Martins maybe not at his best, which makes sense, of course. So Cajun, I like the guy, of course. He's he's a good fighter. He's a good person, but my concerns are A, the 2-year layoff. That's really concerning, and B, even more so than that, is that he's training at TriStar Vancouver. He opened up TriStar Vancouver a year ago or so, just over a year, and he told me recently in an interview, like he's not training with high-level guys at all. He's brought fighters in from the regional circuit and really no-name fighters, and although they might secretly be good, we don't know that. So I have to assume like he's not training with people we know, with high-level guys whatsoever. He doesn't have a head coach. He told me that he brings some people in and he'll go, train with, a striking coach once a week or so, something like that, but he doesn't have specific coaches. And he said he's at a point in his career where he doesn't really need to be coached. He's taught himself so much, and he has so much knowledge where he can almost teach himself. And I just didn't find that to make sense whatsoever. We see, Demetrius Johnson, the best fighter on the planet, he still has a coach. We the best fighters on the planet have coaches, have regular head coaches, have regular striking coaches, grappling coaches, etc. So the lack of coaching for Johnson is a big red flag for me. I think his striking defense will not, it's not good enough. I don't think it'll hold up. Adriano Martins, when he's on, as I said, is one of the best on the planet. He has knockout power. He knocked out Islam Makhachev. That was really impressive. And I think he'll do the same to Cajun Johnson. So give me Adriano Martins by second round TKO. Next up, the featured Fight Pass prelim, Luis Henrique, KLB, taking on newcomer Arjan Singh Bhullar. I didn't know the Singh part was in his name, but according to UFC.com, it is. Jed, Henrique, or Bhullar?
Bhullar all day. It's just so Arjan Bhullar, if you don't know who he is, was a competitive wrestler on the international freestyle circuit. I was at least a one-time Olympian for Canada, possibly two, although I think it was just the one, because I don't think he was in last year's Olympics. So I think it was just 2012. This is a guy who can wrestle, and his striking isn't like awesome, but it's not like it's sort of developing. He's honestly not all that dissimilar from Daniel Cormier in many ways. Obviously not as good, but like similar style game, and Luis Henrique doesn't really have any avenues to victory here. I just don't see how he's going to win. Luis Henrique really, really wants to be able to take somebody down and put his jiu-jitsu game to work. He has a roughly 0% chance of success at enacting that particular game plan against Arjan Bhullar. Dude couldn't take down Marcin Tybura. You telling me he's going to fucking take down an Olympic wrestler? That's just not a fucking thing that's happening. Our Enrique is not a great striker. He's a pretty bad striker. He'll wing some shots at you, and he's a big dude, so they got some power. But outside of him just heaving a haymaker or Bhullar losing all concept of reality and leaving his neck in on a takedown or something, I just don't see how Enrique wins this. Bhullar, on top of that, Bhullar clearly, I think, has a pretty clear gas tank advantage. If you remember Enrique's last fight against Marcin Tybura, I don't know if you guys recall the finish, but the finish was basically Henrique went for a guillotine. It ended up not working out, and that was the last resolve or reserve of his cardio. And then he just sort of collapsed in a pile while leaning up against Tybura on the cage. And Tybura just took his back and then beat the shit out of him because he was just done. Like any of us could have beaten him at that point. He had nothing left. Arjan Bhullar can either sprawl and brawl effectively here or effectively work takedowns on Enrique. Either way, Enrique's going to get tired. Bhullar is either going to coast to a decision, or I think maybe a little bit more likely he just kind of works him over and gets a very late, third round sort of TKO stoppage. I will pick TKO stoppage because I think it's more fun. I could totally see him just grinding out a full decision, though.
I am leaning the same way with you. I have really nothing too much to say with Henrique. I know a lot of the things that Henrique excels at, and when I say excels, just things that he's really good at. against the fighters that he fights, of course, but then also the things that he's bad at. I think Arjan is just a little bit better. The biggest thing is wrestling. Henrique is very active, looking for takedowns, and that's one thing he's been really successful at, landing 11 out of 30 takedowns in his UFC career with 4 fights. Besides that, Bular is just a better wrestler overall, of course, coming from a very, very prestigious background in wrestling. The second thing is that Henrique is not a great striker, which you mentioned, and Bular is coming together a little bit more, but Henrique is not that active, and the times that he usually is active and looking for strikes when he's not looking for those big haymakers is when he gets the opponents down and he's on top. And the 2 fighters that he beat in the UFC were 2 of probably the worst heavyweights in UFC history. Christian Colombo and Dmitry Smolyakov just really they were not able to put anything together in their UFC careers whatsoever. I'm pretty sure neither got a win, but he did lose to respectable athletes, Marcin Tybura, of course, and Francis Ngannou, both top 15 fighters. I do just think Arjan is a much better athlete. I think that he's got the ability to go a full fight for a full 15 minutes because one of his fights on his record, he did go the full 25 minutes. And in that fight, he won every single round. So I've got to pick Arjan Bular in this one. I've got him picked as well by second-round stoppage. I'd like to see him get a finish. I think that maybe he has the abilities to, knowing that Henrique has been finished twice in his past 4 fights by the 2 guys that I mentioned. So I'm thinking maybe he can pull one out with some ground and pound if he gets the fight down to the ground.
Yeah, this is kind of tough to call, but it's not super tough. It's not as close as I don't know, Stevens Melendez, for example. I think I'll complete the hat trick here. Bular, I think, gets the job done. Now it just really comes down to, do I think he goes the distance, which is very possible, or does he get some sort of late TKO? I'll go late TKO. Not confident in that. The matchup here, I mean, Henrique needs to get you down or else he's going to lose, and I just don't see him being able to grind out, as you said, a really, really high-level wrestler in the newcomer Arjan Bular. Bular, really good on the mat in the wrestling department. His striking seems to be getting better. He was fighting out on the BC local scene, and in Canada, I would say the BC scene is probably the best province for MMA right now. Jeremy Kennedy fights out of BC, was the Battlefield champion over there for a little while. I believe Bular was the heavyweight champ. I could be wrong for BFL. Think that is right, though. I think he's a decent fighter. I don't know if he's the next guy at heavyweight. Probably not. But I think he can get the job done over Henrique, who is very surprisingly very young. Henrique, you would never guess it, but I think Henrique's like still only 24, 25. So, when you're that young, you can get better fight to fight, but I just don't see it in Henrique. He's had a number of UFC fights already, and maybe he's gotten a bit better, but not really anything to brag about. So the pick here is Bular by some sort of pretty gritty ground-and-pound TKO in the 3rd round. Next up, we got a lightweight clash between Mitch Clark and Alex White. Jed, Clark, the 2-1 underdog here, or Alex, the Spartan White?
Give me the Spartan White all day. Mitch Clark, I don't know. This is like a fight between guys who are okay, but really not great fighters. And there are a couple reasons I'm going to pick Alex White here. Well, there are really 2 reasons, I guess. So by a couple, I mean actually a couple. The first reason is probably the more salient, responsible reason, and it's just offensive output. Mitch Clark is not a super active fighter, and Alex White throws much more, lands much more on the feet, gets hit about the same, but is a much better defensive fighter, in my opinion, than Mitch Clark is. So I don't think these guys are really going to grapple a whole hell of a lot. Maybe a takedown here or there, but both guys are mediocre wrestlers on both ends of the table. So it's I feel like that kind of cancels out. Mostly we're just going to get a cardio kickboxing fight here, and I favor Alex White's volume and defense to carry the day here. The second reason I'm picking Alex White over Mitch Clark is basically because I cannot for the life of me forget how Joe Duffy emasculated Mitch Clark in what might be one of just the most horrifically one-sided fights we've seen in a year. I don't know. Was that within a year? I don't remember how old.
July of last year.
So a little over a year, but holy shit. Also, then that means Mitch Clark hasn't fought in over a year. That's just let's throw another one onto the pile for why I feel okay about this pick. But yeah, Joe Duffy both knocked out and submitted a dude in like 30 seconds, which is it's pretty interesting to see that happen. It doesn't happen all that often, and you got to feel real bad. And before that fight, Mitch Clark, I believe that was the fight he had officially moved to Jackson Wink, started training there, seemed like he was trying to really make a go of it. And then that happened to him. Mitch Clark is just an interesting dude, man. It's kind of crazy to me to think that this dude who lost to fucking John Cholish in his UFC debut somehow managed to stick around, pick up a win over Ali Akinta, who is a top 10 lightweight and a really good fighter, and, go the distance with Michael Chiesa, who fucking gets onto the back and chokes out everybody in the world. It's just sort of astonishing to me that Mitch Clark he's a weird dude. And maybe I am wrong. Maybe he will benefit greatly because, his last 3 fights have been Joe Duffy, Michael Chiesa, and Ali Akinta. Those are top 10, top 15-ish lightweights. That's a tough run that he's had to face there. Whereas conversely, Alex White has faced like Tony Martin and Artem Lobov. But I don't know. I can't get that image out of my head. Maybe I'll be wrong. I'm willing to believe I'll be wrong. But give me Alex White's volume over Mitch Clark's getting strangled and knocked out by one dude in less than half a minute.
I don't have a whole lot to say on this one either. I'll just add a couple things, I guess. Mitch Clark, Jed, you touched on it. He's been very inconsistent in a lot of his fights. So his last fight did come a year ago in July of 2016. Before that, he fought Michael Chiesa, which was in 2015 in April. He's been pretty much fighting once a year. His last victory came over Ali Akinta, where I feel like he pulled that one out of his ass and pulled some Darce choke out of nowhere that everybody was shocked about because they said it was one of the best submissions of the year just because I think Al had pretty much dominated the first round, and then as soon as the second round started, he shot for a takedown and just made a careless mistake. Before that, he beat John McGuire, who's not in the UFC anymore, but still doing some pretty decent work. But then again, he lost his first 2 UFC fights and to fighters that aren't even in the UFC anymore. So, and before that, his last win came in April of 2011. So he's got 3 wins in the past almost, I guess, 6 years. 3 wins in the past 6 years, which is pretty crazy. Just hasn't been too active at all. It's hard for me to pick him for the same reason Jed mentioned, how he got starched in his last fight against Joseph Duffy. And I know Duffy's a fantastic athlete with a very impressive striking game that he's put up recently, and also very well rounded on the game, on the ground, which he was able to pull off that submission in just 25 seconds. But I really cannot pick a fighter who, in his last fight, to a guy like Alex White, who is 2-3 in the UFC and 1-3 in his last 4. But then again, his wins came to pretty respectable athletes, a little bit more respectable than the fighters that Mitch Clark had lost to. The names like Tony Martin, which was his last fight where he got taken down a couple times. Just not a whole lot of activity from Martin there. White really is better on the feet, which you mentioned his output is there. But then he was able to capitalize and outstrike Artem Lobov in their fight too. So, which he picked up a victory, and Lobov has looked somewhat better as of late. So I'll give him that. Overall, I'm going to be taking Alex White. I thought about a stoppage, but I'm going to go with the decision. I'm not really sure how this one's going to go, though, in terms of a finish. But I do think Alex White is going to be able to pull off the victory.
My pick here is the underdog, Mitch Danger Zone Clark himself. I just don't see it with Alex White. I know how he can win it. As Jed said, make it a cardio kickboxing fight and win that fight. Because if this is 100% on the feet, Mitch Clark's not going to win. Alex White is quite a bit of a better striker than Mitch Clark. I'm not saying he's great, far from it, but Mitch Clark, doesn't have much striking. That's not where he prevails, so to speak. Alex White does like to keep it on the feet, but the key here is Mitch Clark's takedowns. Unlike Jed, I don't see this being much of a cardio kickboxing fight. I think it'll be mostly a grappling fight. I think it'll be one where Clark does very well. I think Mitch Clark, his best assets is his takedowns and his wrestling game. and maybe mix in a couple submissions, but mostly wrestling. And Alex Wade is a guy who stands very tall. He stands very straight, very upwards, and that's good when or not good, I should say, when you're fighting a wrestler. You're a bit more prone to takedowns, and I think that's going to help Mitch Clark here. I think Clark's going to be able to get in on ones and twos, on single leg and double legs, and secure takedowns throughout the fight. Alex White, neither guy is very good. I think Clark, I can't even say he's much better, but stylistically, I think this fight favors him. Of course, the regular concerns, the fact that he's coming off a 28-second knockout / submission loss to Joe Duffy. And that certainly doesn't help, but I think, you guys are putting too much into it in the sense that Mitch Clark has fought very good guys. Michael Chiesa is top 10. Joe Duffy could have the talent to be a top 15 fighter. He's not ranked, but very, could be soon enough. And he won. He beat Al Iaquinta, who of course probably would beat him, today, but still take that for what it's worth. I don't think we saw everything Clark had to offer in those last 28 seconds in July. Far from it. He's training at Jackson Wink now. I think that could pay off. And the layoff, I'm not too concerned with that because Mitch Clark has told me, I've interviewed the guy a handful of times, and the first thing, in our very first interview, Clark made it very clear that he likes taking time off, that, he doesn't want to fight 3 times a year. That's too much for him. He's happy to fight only 1 time a year. And that's essentially what he's done. So he's used to layoffs. He's battled back from them before. He's been through layoffs before, and sometimes by choice. So I think, unlike a lot of fighters, Clark does okay coming off layoffs, so I'm not too concerned about that. Stylistically, I think this is a good fight for him. I think he's able to secure takedowns throughout the fight and grind out a win over Alex White. I don't think it'll be pretty, but give me Clark to get back on track by unanimous decision.
Our first sign of dissension. It's so exciting.
Of course, Nick Baldwin kicking it all off because I'm the only exciting person here.
Yeah, okay. Guy who's picked straight favorites the last 3 cards.
Hey, I picked Brian Bam Bam Barberina, and it nearly paid off in the second round, so give me a break. Gavin Tucker and Rick Glenn in the featherweight division. Jed, are you going to go with the Newfoundland Terror or the Gladiator?
I'll keep this short and sweet. I think the odds are a little bit off here. I think Gavin Tucker should be a favorite. I'm not entirely sure he should be like a minus almost 400 favorite, which is I think what I saw him at. Maybe let me check that because maybe it was wrong. Maybe no, minus 305 still seems a little hefty. But I do favor Gavin Tucker to win, and I think the Newfoundland guy is, at this point he's arguably the best or one of the very best Canadian fighters currently competing in the UFC. I really like his game. I think he's a really good, very competent, very talented Muay Thai practitioner. I think he's got excellent defense on the feet and just a solid, well-rounded offensive game. I think Rick Glenn is okay. I think Rick Glenn could maybe make this fight a little bit interesting if he can find a way to use his size. I think he's going to be considerably larger than Gavin Tucker in the cage, but he is defensively porous, and I think that he's just going to get chewed up on the feet, basically. Yeah, that's pretty much how I see it. Give me Gavin Tucker with a highly competent kickboxing attack to maybe chop down the legs a little bit, maybe just piece him up at range a little bit, and take a pretty clear – I think he'll probably take all 3 rounds, honestly. But, yeah, should be a fun fight still.
Wes?
Wesley's muted.
I've got myself muted again. What I was saying, I've got Gavin Tucker picked as well. Rick Glenn, he's not a bad athlete. He's beat a lot of impressive guys throughout his career. Johnny Case back in the day, he's got a win over Jose Pacheco, and then he was able to beat Georgie Karkakin for the featherweight championship back in World Series of Fighting.
Was he?
Well, he beat him, but he didn't beat him, if you know what I mean. He does have a win over him.
He got the win. He got the win.
Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it. But then he ended up losing Lance Palmer. The biggest thing that I was going to say, and I'm glad, Jed, you mentioned it, is that Rick Glenn is not a good defensive fighter. He takes quite a bit of damage, even though he's got a numerous amount of wins and only 4 losses on his record. But he does get hit quite a bit. And I do think Gavin Tucker, For me, I honestly think Gavin Tucker at some point, probably in the next, maybe I'd say like 2 years from now, he'll be ranked in the top 15 at featherweight. I think he's a fantastic athlete. I think he's got a lot of potential, and I think he's going to be making some moves in the next year. I do think that he's the better striker. Maybe give Rick Glenn the advantage when he's able to get takedowns and get on top, but honestly, he gets hit a little bit too much for me, and we haven't even seen him land any takedowns so far in his UFC career, which were only 2 fights, but debatably in his last fight, Felipe Nover, a lot of people thought Felipe won that one. So my pick is Gavin Tucker. I actually picked a second-round knockout. I do think that he's got the striking abilities. Going against a guy like Rick Glenn, who just doesn't have the defensive abilities on the feet to be able to get a finish. I really do like Gavin Tucker in this one. I think he's got big things coming.
I mean, you said Tucker in the top 15 in 2 years. I mean, I was thinking you were about to say he could be, in the top 5 within 3 or so. I think he could be ranked in a year, barring some sort of crazy injury. Breaks his leg, tears his ACL, something life-changing or career-changing like that. He could be ranked, within a year, assuming he fights maybe at the bare minimum twice next year. Maybe he gets in one more this year. That seems unlikely. Give him a step up. Should he beat Rick Glenn, I think he could be ranked within a year come September of 2018. But this fight, he's taking on Rick Glenn, and it's not a super, super tough test, but it is definitely a step up from Sam Sicilia, I would think. Rick Glenn is super tough. He doesn't have good defense on the feet, and the feet is where it'll play out. Gavin Tucker has really, really insane striking. He has good leg kicks. He has really high output, and that's what's going to give him the win here. Very interestingly, their landed per minute, according to UFC.com, is bang on even at 3.67. I find that a little hard to believe. Glenn was a bit inactive against Felipe Nover. I think I scored the fight for him, but it wasn't nearly as impressive as his loss was to Evan Dunham. Glenn looked decent in defeat to Dunham, stepping up on short notice. Going toe-to-toe with a top 15 guy in Dunham. He looked really good. I think Tucker is so much more technical. I think he's just the better striker. He's a lot more superior. I think this, it's a really good matchup for him because I don't think Glenn can really threat with takedowns or submissions at all. Maybe he can, but I just don't see it happening. I think that this will be a stand-up affair. Tucker is much better on the feet. Glenn, scrappy, good chin, but lack of defense. Tucker, that makes for a good mix for a decision win. Tucker doesn't have the power to knock out Glenn, who has a good chin, but he definitely has the striking ability and volume to outpoint Glenn and bloody him up a little bit. So Tucker, by decision, 30-27 most likely is the pick. Next up, we got a women's bantamweight matchup between Sarah Cheesecake Rice taking on Ashley Rebel Girl Evans-Smith. Jed, the Canadian or the American? Who do you got?
I don't know. I think I must be a fucking idiot. Until I just looked at it, I didn't realize, oh yeah, this card's in Canada, isn't it? It's like, fuck, there seem to be a lot of Canadians on this card. Oh, that's why. Yeah, I'm a real genius here, guys. Yes. So sorry, that just really, I was like, what another Canadian? What the fuck? It's like, oh yeah.
They must have literally the entire Canadian roster on the card, because I remember, going back.
George St. Pierre is on the roster.
Yeah, I guess, and so is Randa Marcos, I believe. But probably the big majority of Canadians are on this card. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know how many Canadians are on roster for the UFC at this point.
I think, but whatever, go on.
But yeah, I don't know why it just struck me when you said, "Oh, the Canadians," like another one. What the fuck? It seems like everyone so far has had every fight. Oh, that makes sense. It's in Edmonton, so yeah, they're doing that. Okay. Yeah. So now that we're past that little brain fart of myself, give me the American Ashley Evans-Smith all goddamn day over Sarah Moraes. One, I don't know if you guys are aware of this. Did you know Sarah Moraes hasn't fought in 2 years? Because that's a long fucking time. That's like a really long time to come off a layoff. And she hasn't won in 3 years because she had been on about a year-long layoff before she fought Jessica Andrade, and she had won over Alexis Dufresne coming off the Tough House, where, I don't know, did she make it to the finals? No, she didn't make it to the finals. Where was she? She lost to Pena. There you go. I'm looking it up now. She lost to Pena in the Tough House. That's not that awful. Jillian Pena is a really good fighter. But yeah, I just don't. I get Ashley Evans Smith has been active and is a pretty solid fighter. I don't take anything away to her from losing to Ketlen Vieira. I think we'll talk about Ketlen Vieira coming up here, but I think she's a top 10, one of the top 10 fighters in the world of her weight class. So I don't take anything away from her that. I think Ashley Evans Smith is a solid, volume striker. She's gonna throw a lot of stuff on the feet, decent defensively. Gets hit some, but you expect somebody to get hit when they throw as much as she does. And I think that's really the difference here. I don't think Samurai can or even really will functionally shoot for takedowns here. I guess I just don't even know. I just don't really know what to expect from Mariah since she's been out for 2 years. Like it's hard to know what she'll look like coming in here. I just think Ashley Evans Smith is gonna play a little sprawl and brawl volume kickboxing attack. Take it on the points side of things and I don't think she'll get Samurais out. That's not. I mean, she has shown Ashley Evans Smith has shown the ability to finish with elbows in particular. She's a pretty solid do pretty solid work with those, but basically I just think Samurai is just going to get out kickboxed here. So give me Ashley Evans Smith by decision.
I really have nothing else to add on this one. I 100%. She hasn't fought in 2 years since Jessica Andrade in the fight she lost. A lot of people, I remember back when she fought Alexis Dufresne, thought Alexis Dufresne won that one and thought she won like every single round in it. Dufresne isn't really the highest caliber fighter in the world, but she's still pretty talented. Still really struggled in her UFC career, having lost to Marion Renault. But overall, I don't really think Samaras' game is going to get her too far in this fight. She's, I mean, a decent athlete. She does have some pretty decent skills, but in comparison to Ashley Evans Smith, Ashley's fought, I think, the better competition. She's been able to pull off some pretty impressive victories. A lot of people counted Evan Smith out of the Veronica Machado fight, in a fight where Machado pretty much just got dominated, and Ashley was able to give her the first loss of her career. The fight before that, I know she fought Marion Renault in a fight that was very controversial when it came down to the decision. I thought Renault took every round, but Evan Smith is a very decent fighter when she's on the feet and keeps it on the feet. The only times that she does lose, such as the Vieira fight in her last one and the Pennington fight, were times she gets taken down and have fighters on top. I don't think Marasa is going to be able to get this one down. For that reason, I'm taking Evan Smith by a unanimous decision, probably 30-27.
Yeah, I like Ashley Evans Smith here quite a bit. I just don't know what to expect from Sarah Moraes coming off a 2-year layoff. That's a big layoff. And, same goes for Cajun Johnson. It's crazy how we're, 5 fights in and we've talked about 3 fighters that are coming off over 1-year layoffs and in 2 fighters' cases, 2-year layoffs. Quite unbelievable. But Evan Smith is just a better fighter. Size-wise, stats-wise, she's not much bigger really at all than Moraes. Height is just 1 inch and reach is the same. But she seems just, to me, when I think of the fighters, she seems a lot bigger. And I have this feeling that she might be able to bully Moraes in there a little bit. Moraes, again, I'm not really, I don't know what to expect. I think Evan Smith will just be able to pretty much dominate her. I think it'll be pretty close, probably a 30-27 victory if it does go to the judges. I think Evan Smith can outwin on the feet. I don't think it'll be a super pretty fight. And I do think there's a chance, though, for Evan Smith to get Moraes out of there. I think she might be able to take Moraes down in the later
Wes,
rounds.
does Nick sound awful to you? Because he sounds super fucking bad to me.
He sounds awful to me. It's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Nick. I had to cut you off. You are getting scratchy as hell, and it's terrible. So you should try.
I don't know if you guys are going to get better now. Maybe not.
Nope, you're still terrible. Like, it's very...
You sound like a robot.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, well, my pick is Evan Smith by TKO in the third round.
We'll take it from here, Nick. You try and figure that out. So Nick has picked Evan Smith by TKO in the second or third round. Moving on, I believe this is the Fox Sports? I don't even know. Is this on FS1 Wes, you have any fucking idea what channel any of these fights are
I'm pretty
happening
sure
on?
it's on Fox Sports 1.
Yeah,
Should be
this
the main.
is the Fox Sports 1 prelim main event, which I think was even the main event before the Johnson fight. I think Cejudo Hayes was not the Fox Sports 1 main event. So getting a little bit of extra love here for the UFC women's bantamweight division. We have Sarah McMahon, former title challenger, taking on the new hotness in the division, Ketlin Vieira, Wes Riddle. Tell me what you're thinking here. How do you feel about the former Olympic silver medalist, Sarah McMahon, taking on what seems to be the next big thing?
I think I've been really impressed with Sarah McMahon in these past few fights. I know she's coming off a fight over one of the biggest mismatches in pretty much mixed martial arts history, where she fought Gina Mazzani. I honestly don't know if I can think of a worse matchup than that fight. Can you? I mean, that might be one of the worst of all time.
It's definitely a bad one. It's definitely a bad one.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that one. But then again, before that, she was able to pull off a pretty impressive performance in her fight with Alexis Davis. And then before that, got a pretty good victory over Jessica Ai, who, of course, isn't really on the best streak right now as she's lost numerous in a row. But still pretty decent names before that Gina Mazzani fight. Her losses have come, of course, to the best of the best. We saw her lose the majority decision to Miesha Tate in a fight where she started off very strong, almost, I think, had her knocked out and submitted at some point. Lost to Amanda Nunes, but what can you say? She's Amanda Nunes. And then Ronda Rousey, which was a little bit controversial because I think she could have kept going. She did get kneed in the gut and try to get back up, but Herb waved it off a little early. I think Vieira's got a lot of talent. I do think that she's going to be somebody to watch out for in the future. But one thing that kind of has concerned me in her fights is that she doesn't have a lot of activity on the feet. I can say the same thing about Sarah McMahon, but I feel like Vieira just stands out a little bit more prominent. The fight that makes me think of that was the Kelly Fazholz fight, where she pretty much looked for takedowns over and over. And besides that, takedowns didn't have a lot of activity with her strikes, just looked for a lot more control, didn't really try any submissions in the fight. And then when the fight was on the feet, Kelly was the one landing all the punches. Vieira wasn't pretty much landing anything at all, just a couple things here and there, and continuously looking for the clinch and those takedowns. I'm going to go Sarah McMahon in this one. I think that Vieira does have some talent, of course, and that she's going to be somebody to watch out for in the future. But I do think that this may be just a little bit of a push, just a little bit enough to where I think it's a little bit too early for her. Because Vieira, she's, 26 years old, and she only has, I don't know how many fights, maybe like 7 or 8, I think. Not a whole lot. McMahon has just quite a bit of experience, arts, and also inside it. And her wins are a lot more prominent. Some of her wins are over the best of the competition. She beat Raquel back in the day, Tanya Evinger back in the day, Shayna Baszler back when she was a little more competitive. Picked up some pretty big UFC wins. I'm going to go Sarah McMahon in this one. Finish. I really don't think she could. But I do think if I were ever to favor McMahon by finish, probably by submission, which actually I don't have any submissions picked on the whole card. So I'm going to pick, just to make it fun, I'm going to pick McMahon. I cannot talk right there. McMahon by a second-round submission. I don't know if she can pull it off, but just there's always going to be like maybe one submission on the card. And since I didn't have any picks, I do think that she wants to get one in this fight.
I don't hate a pick by submission here. I'm also going to pick McMahon. A lot of the same reasons Wes did. Basically, I'm picking McMahon because I'm a huge Sarah McMahon stan. I think that it's like on her best days when things are clicking for her. I think maybe she might be the best women's bantamweight on the planet. I think that she has the unfortunate tendency to falter or misstep a lot, which is a little bit of a problem. I think some of that has to do with comfortability, where if she can't enact her game plan, going to a backup plan, being forced to exchange on the feet, I think she panics a little more than she needs to and starts really then aggressively pursuing takedowns instead of letting them organically appear. And then she tires herself out and gets herself into some trouble. I think that we've seen that happen a couple times with her. I think that sort of is what happened in the Nunes fight. I think she felt Nunes' power, got a little a little over aggressive. She didn't really want to be there, and then suddenly ended up getting her shit kicked in. I think that she's doing better about that. I think we've seen that in her last few fights. Like Wes said, I really like what I've seen from Sarah McMahon lately. Granted, she's had favorable competition too there. You know, Jessica I lost 8 million in a row. Alexis Davis was always a pretty good style matchup for her, but Alexis Davis is a legit BJJ black belt, and Sarah McMahon still choked her out. Like that's a legit feather in her cap right there. Gina Mazzani, don't really take anything from that fight. Obviously, that fight was, you know, not supposed to happen or whatever. That was supposed to be Liz Carmouche, which would have been a really interesting fight. Mazzani's late replacement. But Sarah McMahon did what you're supposed to do against overmatched competition. No bones about it. Took her down, tapped her out in 90 seconds. Like, that's all you can really ask for at that point. I like Caitlin Vieira. I think she's a young talent in a division that needs it. I think she's got some skills, but she did lose a round to Kelly Fazhold. And then she lost a scorecard on some judge, right? Isn't that right? Which that seemed like that was off, but she hasn't been taken down in the UFC yet, but I don't think that she also hasn't faced Sarah McMahon yet. I think Sarah McMahon's going to be able to work takedowns. I think she's getting more comfortable on the feet too, and Caitlin Vieira is not like a great striker. She's actually a really hittable striker. And I don't think Caitlin Vieira has 0% chance to take Sarah McMahon down. Like there's no chance that happens. So I think this is a pretty favorable style matchup for McMahon. I think on the feet it's competitive. McMahon maybe can flex a little bit more there with some stuff she's been working on. I think she can control the wrestling and control the fight. So yeah, give me Sarah McMahon. I'm going to take her on points. I could totally see her getting a submission. She seems to be focusing more on finishing fights when she gets on the ground and not just grinding out, working those chokes. So I could see it happening. I'm just going to take points. So Nicholas, I hope your mic is back. How do you see this fight?
Is my back? Do I sound
nope, you sound awful.
Nope. Let's try.
I don't even know what happened. Did you press some buttons or some shit? Like what happened here? Reset your mic. Can you do that? Unplug and plug it back in. Let's try and make it happen again.
All right.
While he's doing that, Nick's pick was McMahon by decision, probably for the same reasons that we were talking about. Besides that,
we can't be sure. It's possible that he thinks Sarah McMahon is about to become a dominant kickboxer and just outpoint Caitlin Vieira, maybe with a couple of 10-8 rounds in there because of a strong right hook. Nicholas, am I correct? Are you picking Sarah McMahon because of her strong kickboxing?
Yes, of course.
Hey, look, there you go.
Not bad.
Yes. All right. Jed, thank you for telling me to unplug it. That seemed to do the trick. I have nothing else to add because I feel like we have been talking about this fight for 10 minutes and we don't need to be. McMahon will take Vieira down, grind her out. It won't be too fun, but it will be what she needs to do. I don't think she's, as Jed said, when she's on maybe the best woman's bandweight on the planet. I think quite clearly she's not and never will be. But Vieira, she can go far. She's 8-0. She's got a couple wins in UFC. She's looked good, but this is a bit of too big of a step up right now. McMahon should get the job done, should be able to grind out a decision on the mat, maybe even a submission, as you guys said, but McMahon by decision is my pick. Now we move on to probably what might, people consider the people's main event. Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens taking on Gilbert Melendez in the first fight on pay-per-view. Jed, Stevens, or Mr. Gilbert himself?
I don't know. I have made my picks for all but 2 fights on this card. They happen to be the next 2 fights we are talking about, so I'm going to try and talk my way to a decision and see where I end up. With this fight, it's a lot easier for me to figure out where I'm ending up because a lot of it's basically, hey, Gilbert Melendez hasn't fought in like 87 years, so how does he look, after this extended steroid layoff that he has been on, or maybe it wasn't steroids. I don't remember. Whatever suspension that he was on versus Little Heathen Stevens. And how does he look making his drop to featherweight for the first time? The drop to featherweight I'm a little less concerned with than some other people are because I think, to me, Gilbert Melendez always was a featherweight masquerading as a lightweight with a great amount of success. This is a guy who should have been the UFC lightweight champion. Benson Henderson, in his title run where he basically never legitimately won a fight other than the Nate Diaz fight. He lost like 6 in a row, but won them all by bullshit split decisions. One of those was against Gilbert Melendez. Gilbert Melendez should have been the UFC lightweight title holder. Pretty clearly in my mind that he beat Benson Henderson, but alas, that's not how things shook out. But even then, I think he always just seemed like a guy that could have and should have been fighting at 145. That if like he and Nate Diaz had ever been, they're both Cesar Gracie Jiu-Jitsu guys. So if they had both been in legitimate title contention, I think you would have seen Gilbert make the drop earlier. Now on a 3-fight losing streak in the lightweight division, and I think he's only won one fight in the UFC. He beat Diego Sanchez in a fight that was awesome, and that he almost then lost at the very end of it as well. He hasn't had a great run in the UFC lightweight division, and part of that is unfortunate. Part of that is maybe he's getting a little slower, a little worse. Part of it is he's fighting tougher guys, and I think he's just trying to see what happens with the drop down, and it could work out well for him. It's hard for me to say, because if you look at his last 5 fights, he is 1-4. He beat Diego Sanchez. We just established that. The Benson Henderson loss should have beat that. Very clearly he was beating Anthony Pettis until he was not beating Anthony Pettis. And that, Pettis just kind of manhandled him in that second round there. Eddie Alvarez, split decision loss. I think that is the one fight in the UFC I think Eddie Alvarez has won, in my opinion, but it was a really close fight. And you can argue that Gilbert Melendez won that fight. And then lost to Edson Barbosa, who longtime listeners of the show will know I think is going to be the lightweight champion within the next year. I maintain that even in spite of the fact that the UFC lightweight division is the biggest clusterfuck in the world, and that is a solid chance Edson Barbosa won't be allowed to fight for the title next year. I still think he has a real case to be the best lightweight on the planet. I really like his game. And I think his game is also just anathema to what Gilbert Melendez does. So, no shame in losing there. Conversely, we're talking about Jeremy Stephens, who was previously a lightweight, had a brutal knockout win over Rafael dos Anjos, who was the lightweight champion for a little bit. We're going to talk about him going forward tonight as well. But since dropping to featherweight, kind of put together a really good run, got himself ranked, but has had a rough go of things in the last little bit. Lost a split decision to Renato Carneiro, lost to Frankie Edgar, beat Renan Barão in a fight I picked him as the underdog. What? Lost to Max Holloway, but beat Dennis Bermudez. And his other 2 featherweight fights, lost to Charles Oliveira, lost to Cub Swanson, beat Darren Elkins, beat Hani Jason. And beat Estevan Papayan. That's his featherweight run. Thing you'll notice about his featherweight run, though, if you're paying attention to those names I just ran off, he has beaten 2 good featherweights and lost to all the other ones. Dennis Bermudez is a good featherweight, a lower end ranked guy that he knocked out, that Jeremy Stephens knocked out. Dennis Bermudez also has a tendency to get hit by big shots and get knocked out. And Darren Elkins, who I have a great deal of respect for as a fighter, but Jeremy Stephens beat him. Other than that, though, he's lost to all the good featherweights he has fought, like Frankie Edgar, Max Holloway, Charles Oliveira, Cub Swanson. Those are all good featherweights. He beat Renan Barão, who is a bantamweight / featherweight, who's like whatever. And basically, that's sort of why I'm going to end up picking Melendez. I'm going to assume that he comes off this year-long layoff and looks okay, looks pretty reasonable. And I think that he is just a more active fighter. Like he's a more active offensive threat. Jeremy Stephens really relies a lot on the fact that he has big power and solid takedown defense. I think Stephens can stuff most of Melendez's shots, but I think Melendez will be able to get him down occasionally. And I just think on the feet, Gilbert throws more, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more defensively sound, and he has a really good chin. Like Jeremy Stephens can crack it, because if Jeremy Stephens hits you square, you're going to fall over probably, but I like Gilbert Melendez's abilities here. I think that he's just a more technical, more sound fighter, and I think he's going to earn himself a featherweight ranking, and we'll see if he still has enough left in the tank to make a real title push.
Yeah, I'm going to be leaning, I think, Gilbert Melendez too here in this one. It's hard for me to pick him, though, in the sense that His last victory came in October of 2013 to Diego Sanchez in that amazing fight. Before that, it was in May of 2012 over Josh Thompson, who I think he did lose to at one point in his career. I should say he beat Ben Henderson because he did beat Ben Henderson, but the judges didn't think that, therefore they gave it to Ben Henderson. So he did have a little streak together, but it's been a while. Then he started fighting once a year. The fight with Anthony Pettis came, and he got choked out by that guillotine in the second round, which he did look decent in the first round. I did give it to him. Then the second round came out, and we saw that he was able to hurt Eddie a little bit earlier with some strikes, but then Eddie was able to capitalize on the wrestling. Some of the holes Gilbert's had recently for some reason in his wrestling, and Eddie was able to squeeze out that split decision victory, where I did agree with the decision. I thought Eddie took it the last two. Then he lost to Edson Barboza in his last one, where he was able to crack him a couple times, nothing really significant, but he was able to kind of hang in there on the feet a little bit here and there with Edson Barboza. But then again, Barboza got a takedown in that one over Gilbert. So I don't know what's happening with Gilbert. He used to be really like a defensive sound wrestler, was never really able to get taken down. A lot of the opponents that he fought just weren't able to capitalize on that. But more recently, he struggled with it. Maybe he's focusing more on the striking technique. But I think that I think you mentioned it too, Jed, that Melendez, his output is a little bit more there, I think, than Stevens. I think that Stevens has kind of struggled a little recently. Wasn't able to connect a whole lot on Renato Moicano, who utilized a lot of movement to get that decision victory. The fight with Frankie Edgar, I think he did hurt him for a split second in that second round, but ended up losing the unanimous decision. Renan Barão was able to capitalize, but that he gets taken down quite a bit. His takedown defense, it says on the UFC's website, is 65%. But then again, Gilbert Melendez, he's pretty successful when he gets takedowns himself. And like a lot of the takedowns, both these two are getting taken down more recently against fighters who aren't really known for their takedowns than they were earlier on in their career. So I think that's pretty interesting. But I do think that Gilbert Melendez is just a little bit more technical. I think that he's a little bit more well-rounded. Not sure how this maybe steroid, I don't know if it was or not, thing is going to play a factor. I don't know how he's going to be fighting now. But then again, I think when he fought Barboza, he was clean, and he had the year layoff. So I'm going to go Melendez. I do think this will be a fight of the night contender. I think it could be pretty exciting on the feet, but I think it depends a lot on these two output, knowing that they're both decent strikers. But I'll take Melendez in the end by probably a 29-28, 30-27 unanimous decision.
Oh, this is a tough one. This is the toughest fight for me to call on the entire card, and I think a lot of people feel that way. This whole fight really comes down to, does Gilbert Melendez still have what it takes to be a guy, be a top-ish fighter in either the lightweight or featherweight division? He's been fighting monsters at lightweight, particularly Edson Barboza, Pettis when he was still really good. Even throw Eddie Alvarez's name in there, even though a Gilbert scorecard in that fight was reasonable. At featherweight, he doesn't look too drained out. He doesn't look too bad weight-wise. It doesn't look like the cut was all too bad, so that's good. That's a positive. He hasn't fought for a long time. That is not good, usually, a lot of the time. He only has one UFC win, although that should be more than one. Officially, he has just one. That was 4 years ago against Diego Sanchez. Something with Gilbert Melendez, he should have been able to do much better in his later years in the UFC. This is so tough. Stylistically, he's a more technical fighter, and he's just better. He has more ways to win. But going in, I was picking Stevens, but I'm really tempted to change, but I'm not sure I can quite pull the trigger. Stevens hits a lot harder. He has knockout power, although I feel like the knockout power is slightly overrated. He doesn't actually have too many knockouts over the past few years. He still does hit hard. I don't think he knocks Melendez out. I think that'd be crazy. Melendez, I think if Stevens knocks out Melendez, I think then you really have to say, okay, Gilbert probably should retire Gilbert has always had a really, really good chin and has always been very, very durable. So I don't think that happens, but I think he's able to outpoint Gilbert on the feet a little bit. I think he lands the harder shots. I think maybe not more shots, but I think the output will be slightly even, more so towards Melendez. I think he has a bit better output and volume. I don't think, this is so tough. I don't know how this is going to play out. It's going to be on the feet. Melendez has the opportunity here to take Stevens down and make it a wrestling match. Could happen. I don't think it will. I just gut feeling is that Melendez makes this a stand-up fight, which is what Steven wants. I think this plays out into Steven's favor a little bit. I think he gets the job done on the feet. I think he very, very, I think he edges Gilbert just by a little bit. I think it could be a controversial scorecard. Perhaps we'll see. Stevens by decision is the pick. I'll go split decision. Jeremy Stevens, split decision. Going to be fun. Don't miss it. Could be close, and still, right now, I'm not too sure. Gun to my head, I'll pick Stevens, but, man, this is the close one. Next up isn't much less close. Ilir Latifi and Tyson Pedro in the light heavyweight division. Number 10, the Sledgehammer versus number 13 from Australia. Jed, Latifi or Pedro, who do you got?
This is a really tough fight for me to call. I think outside the main event, I think this might be the closest one on the card for me. Because the Stevens-Melendez fight isn't close. It's really just a question of how's Gilbert look. That's kind of the driving factor behind the difficulty in picking for me. Latifi Pedro, there are a ton of unknowns. Even if all the factors are known going in, it's still interesting. Like Tyson Pedro is really, really raw. Like he's had 5 or 6 fights. He's 2-0 in the UFC, but this is a guy who started fighting like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, maybe. Fuck, I don't even remember. He started in like 2015. He is just, and he's got a lot of skill or a lot of potential, not skill, I'll say. He's got a lot of potential, and in the light heavyweight division, he's a young guy with some talent. Like everybody's going to be excited about that because the division's paper thin. But Ilir Latifi is an established vet with a very functional MMA game that has really succeeded against all but, mostly the best guys at 205. His losses are to Bader and Blachowicz. I know Blachowicz is a middling kind of guy, but we're still talking about a top 10, top 15 light heavyweight. Tyson Pedro just hasn't fought any. It's a huge step up in competition from Paul Craig, and on the sort of like the skill side, what we know is going to happen here. Look, Tyson Pedro is much bigger than Ilir Latifi as far as size and length. But like Ilir, we all know Ilir Latifi is built like a brick shit house. This dude's like 4 of me sideways. But Pedro is tall. He's got a long reach. He's got a 6-inch reach advantage coming into this fight, and a 5-foot height advantage, or 5-inch, not foot. Holy shit, a 5-inch height advantage. And a ton, like I think 8 years the younger. Like all of those are nice physical attributes for him to have here. He's more active on the feet. He is a really good, but really where he excels is working takedowns and working people over on top. He seems to have power on the feet, but he really has good power with his ground and pound. And can do some work in the clinch. But Ilir Latifi it's hard for me to kind of figure out what's going to happen here because, like, Ilir Latifi is not a great striker, but he has KO power. Like, he has legitimate KO power. He throws freaking heaters, and he's not a bad striker. He knows when to throw and does that pretty effectively. He's also a powerhouse wrestler. We've seen him use that really effectively for his whole career. Great top position work, similar to what Pedro does. Hold and hit on top. He's very good at that. He's not like a great wrestler in that he has like a high success rate on his shots, but he is consistent with his shooting, with working takedowns in the clinch up against the cage, and getting power lifts, power slams. To me, I'm gonna pick Latifi, both because I haven't picked an underdog yet, and because Pedro's still really hittable on the feet. Like, he's really defensively open. And if he gets hit by Ilir Latifi, like, that can be a bad way for him. I could absolutely see Pedro kind of maintaining enough distance on the feet and scoring points there. Maybe being able to get – I know it'll be hard for him to get Latifi down. I don't think anyone's gotten Latifi down. But maybe in some sort of a scramble create that and get him down. And then maybe just eke out a little win here. But – or really, I think Pedro's actually best avenue to success is in the clinch. I think we saw Ryan Bader just eat Ilir Latifi's insides up with a knee to the gut from that sort of clinch range. I think Pedro could maybe have a lot of success there. But I can see Ilir Latifi just throwing hammers on the feet, catching Pedro, or just grinding him up against the fence, working takedowns, getting takedowns, and just kind of out-hustling him, having a little more veteran savvy. And just – we haven't seen Pedro fight longer than like 4 minutes. So Ilir Latifi, not like some cardio monstrosity, but I think we know that he has enough to go the distance. We don't really know that Tyson Pedro has that. So we'll see. There are too many unknowns for me. I'm picking Ilir Latifi for the upset. Wouldn't be surprised if Pedro wins. I think this is a pretty compelling fight, though.
I was thinking about picking Ilir Latifi, but I've been leaning a little bit more towards Tyson Pedro for a couple different reasons. So both of Tyson Pedro's wins in the UFC came over fighters he was able to take down to the ground, both Paul Craig and Khalil Rountree. Besides that, wins, some of them were mixed back and forth, getting the knockouts on the feet or taking down his opponents. Ilir Latifi, on the other hand, I don't know if you all know this, has 100% takedown defense, has never been taken down. I don't even think in his mixed martial arts career. I've definitely went back and watched a lot of his former UFC fights, and I've never seen him taken down besides the time where he made his UFC debut and him and Blagoy fell out of the ring. Besides that, I think one of the biggest reasons that stood out to me why I think I should pick Tyson Pedro in this one is a reason that you kind of pointed on, Jed, and that's the clinch. Tyson Pedro's work in the clinch is absolutely phenomenal, mixes in some pretty great and crisp elbows, mixes up knees to the head if you can, knees to the body. And that's one thing that Ilir Latifi has always had a little bit of a hole in. All three of his losses, he's lost more than 3 fights, but his 3 losses in his career that came by knockout all came by fighters who damaged the midsection. The first one came back early on in his career, 2009, over Tatsuya Mizuno, who's a very well-known fighter. Was able to get a finish in that one after kneeing him in the body, and he fell down and landed a lot of punches. His second or third, actually, let's see, his 4th UFC fight, he fought Jan Blachowicz, and in a fight where I thought Latifi was going to win, Jan landed a huge body kick, one thing that's one of his specialties, or especially in the opening round where he's really strong and compelling, a huge kick to the body, which hurt Latifi in that one, was able to capitalize there. And then his last fight, he fought Ryan Bader. Bader was able to land some great kicks to the body where Latifi seemed to hurt a little bit and crumple. And then he ended up getting brutally knocked out in that last fight, probably the worst knockout of the 3 losses by knockout on his resume. So I think that maybe he's going to have – Pedro will have a chance in the clinch positions to get some kind of a finish if he targets that midsection. And for that reason, I actually have leaned towards Pedro by a second-round finish. Maybe you get the first, second-round finish of his career because Latifi sometimes does show some durability in his fights besides that Jan fight. But I'm a little questioning of Tyson Pedro's cardio. I recall in the Paul Craig fight, Paul was able to land some decent punches here and there. And it looked like Pedro was getting a little bit tired, maybe not too much, but just maybe not 100% there. Then again, it was only his second UFC fight. Pedro has a great right hand if he can land it and uses it very well from a distance, something that Ilir Latifi isn't really that good at, and that's finding range with his punches. A lot of his power with power behind it and nothing really else, not a whole lot of combinations. Sometimes here and there, depending on where he can get his opponents in the fights. For the majority of it, it's just a lot of power shots and big bombs. I think Tyson Pedro can capitalize on that in the fight, maybe look in the clinch there in the second round and get a finish by landing some punch or kick to the midsection.
This is another close fight. I think Tyson Pedro is one of the better light heavyweight prospects we've seen in a little while. I think Misha Cirkunov, before he started to be ranked in the top 10, was also definitely in that discussion. And obviously the loss to Volkan Ozdemir has sort of halted the hype train, so to speak. The biggest concern is that we just haven't seen Pedro. Well, we haven't seen much of him at all. He's had 6 pro fights. He's 6-0, so that's great. But we also haven't seen him going, into the second and third rounds. All 6 have finished in the first round, and I think within 4 minutes. This is a massive, massive step up in competition, and one that I'm gonna say he does pass, but not by a lot. I think Pedro can win. I think Latifi sure can too. The thing with Latifi is that just looking at his record, he hasn't actually fought, other than in his wins, he hasn't fought actually that great of fighters. Jean Vellante, Sean O'Connell, Hans Stringer. And then when he fought a top guy in Ryan Bader, he lost. Question marks with Pedro, of course. We still haven't seen much of him, as I said. And this might be overrating him a little bit, but I think Pedro is the second best fighter Latifi has fought in probably his UFC career, and the best fighter he got knocked out to.
Wow, you're just really not digging Jan Blachowicz, are you?
Well, we've talked about Jan Blachowicz, whether that's on this show or the MMA circus.
He fought Gegard Mousasi. Fuck Weasel. Gegard is definitely better than Tyson Pedro.
Oh, yes. Okay, I totally forgot about that. Yes.
He also lost to Gegard Mousasi, but still.
Third best fighter, maybe, unless, I'm forgetting someone else. Out of his recent fights, Pedro is the second best fighter he has fought. Size-wise, Pedro is much bigger. I think that could come into play. It usually doesn't with Latifi fights. Vellante is bigger. I'm sure Sean O'Connell was a little bit bigger, but I think Pedro is a bit more technical, and I think just a better fighter than both those fighters. And I think he can work, use his range a bit better and his size a bit better than other Latifi opponents. This is tough. I'm going Pedro. I'm going Pedro. As I said, I think he wins by decision, which I'm not confident because Pedro hasn't even gone out of the first round, and I know Jed clearly is shocked by my Pedro by decision pick.
No, I was looking at something completely different.
All right. Pedro by decision is the pick. I think he uses his size well. I think he's well-rounded. I think he can work Latifi in the clinch. I think he can use his reach advantage to outpoint Latifi on the feet. Latifi either needs to get Pedro down and hold him down or needs to knock him out with the haymaker. Latifi's coming off a knockout loss. I think, a lot of his God status, was sucked out of his body in that fight. He definitely lost quite a bit in that Bader loss. The guy, he still is a mystical creature of mixed martial arts, but, Pedro's pretty good too. Tyson Pedro by decision. Oh, Jed, what was that you were looking at? I'm curious.
Well, we'll talk about it in our very next fight, which happens to be Henry Cejudo versus Wilson Hayes.
Don't tell me it is canceled.
No, it's not canceled.
Okay, good.
I was looking at the staff picks we do at MMA Fighting, a little behind the scenes action, and a lot of people picking Wilson Hayes. I was extremely surprised by it. It's about an even split between Cejudo and Hayes, which is astonishing to me. So, interesting stuff there. And I guess that I'll just use that to segue us seamlessly on into the next fight. It's an astonishing pick to me because this seems like a very clear-cut Henry Cejudo win. I like Wilson Hayes. I think I like Wilson Hayes more than most people, honestly. I think he's a good, solid fighter. I also think Wilson Hayes' game relies almost entirely on his ability to take people down, and he has roughly a 0% chance of succeeding in that. I feel like I've said that a lot in this card, but all the other ones are even less so than this. Henry Cejudo isn't just a wrestler. He's not just a good international freestyle wrestler. He is an Olympic gold medalist. Now, granted, he was not a favorite to medal in those Olympics. His medal sort of came out of nowhere. He was not expected to do nearly as well as he did, But we're still talking about a guy who was able to, at one point, beat all the other wrestlers in the world to take an Olympic medal. That's really fucking impressive. And we have seen him beat everybody he has faced but for Demetrius Johnson. Get the fuck out of here if you're trying to tell me Joseph Benavidez beat him, because you're a fucking liar. I had money on Joseph Benavidez, and I know that he lost that fucking fight. So Henry Cejudo is, he's the 2A to Joseph Benavidez's 2B in that division. Demetrius is the clear-cut guy. Cejudo and Benavidez are the next two guys. They're better than everybody else. Maybe that would be different if Kyoji Horiguchi was still allowed to exist in the UFC, but he's making more money doing other things, so good for him. Wilson Hayes is a very good fighter. I thought that it was fine he got a title shot, even if it was a little weird that he got a title shot off beating a bunch of people that aren't that good, but he's still a really competent guy. And he's a competent fighter all around, but on the feet, Cejudo isn't like a great striker, but he's an effective one. He throws a lot of volume, works good solid leg kicks, and Wilson Hayes is going to be stuck on the feet with him. He throws less, is more hittable on the feet, so I don't see how this adds up to anything other than a Cejudo win. If Cejudo wants, he can take Wilson Hayes down and can do it at will. Wilson Hayes has never been a particularly good defensive wrestler. So Cejudo controls where this fight takes place and probably wins in all phases. The only place Henry Cejudo is losing to Wilson Hayes is if he gets his back, or if he somehow gets his back taken or gets his back on the mat. I do not think either of those are likely at all. I think this is all day. Henry Cejudo wins 3 of the 3 rounds, 30-27 decision for the Olympic gold medalist.
Question 2, some of the damage that Wilson Hayes has taken over the years. He has been able to pick up some pretty impressive victories recently, but then he did lose to Demetrius Johnson brutally in his last fight and was submitted in an area that he excels in. And I don't recall, I'm checking real quick just to make sure that, yeah, Wilson Hayes has never been submitted before. And knowing how prestigious he is in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it says a lot. But he's a decent athlete, but I do think he's far past his time.
Well, to be fair, that wasn't really a submission so much. It was he got his shit kicked in and got mercy tapped. Those are a little different. A little different.
Yeah, I guess if Demetrius didn't do as much damage as he did, maybe Wilson Hayes wouldn't have got finished like that. But Wilson Hayes, I do think he's older in his fighting career. Of course, he's now, I think it's going to be like his 35th fight, something ridiculous like that. Wilson Hayes has, like I said, picked up some pretty impressive victories. But Henry Cejudo, I thought Henry Cejudo clearly beat Joseph Benavidez, and I was shocked when they gave it to Joseph Benavidez in that one. And I'm pretty sure he would have won it if he didn't get that point taken for a low blow in like the first round. But I do think Henry Cejudo, I thought he looked better than Benavidez in that fight than Benavidez, even though Benavidez by the decision. Besides that, Henry Cejudo still looked very, very sharp in his career. Of course, a very good wrestler, but also a very coming along striking game. And I've said that for a while now, pretty much throughout all of his UFC fights. But you know what? In the Joseph Benavidez fight, he did look like his striking had improved tremendously, and I think it's up there now. But I think he's a much more well-rounded athlete. I don't think that Cejudo is going to make any mistakes really to where if, let's say, he gets a takedown, Wilson Hayes might throw something off of his back. I think that Cejudo is a very, very dominant and controlling top wrestler when he gets control from top. And I don't think Wilson Hayes is very good when he's off of his back. I don't really recall him ever getting a finish off his back or being able to reverse positions too well. The Husier Formiga fight is something that stands out to me a little bit. But I don't want to talk too much more about this because I'm pretty sure we all want to be able to talk about the main event next. But I do think that, or at least the co-main in the main event, I think that Cejudo is going to be able to get this one done. Pretty confident in his abilities. I think that he could get a finish by strikes, but I'm going to be picking a decision as he hasn't had a finish since May of 2013. But Cejudo is the pick.
Yeah, I'm going Henry Cejudo here as well. I don't think he finishes. I know some people are calling for a TKO, just looking at the Bloody Elbow stock predictions. A couple of people have Cejudo by TKO here, which is possible, but he doesn't, he's on a finisher for the most part. I don't think he changes that here. The guy is, this, I don't really have to say much more than what you guys said. Wilson Hayes, if he somehow gets on top of Cejudo or is in some sort of dominant position on the mat, okay, sure, maybe he can win. But the likelihood of that happening is so next to none. There's really no point in talking about that. Cejudo should be able to, and he will be able to keep this one standing. He is a very good boxer. He's getting better on the feet, of course. His bread and butter is his wrestling, but there's no point taking Hayes down when you're just, opening up or increasing Hayes' chances. Him taking down a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or a great BJJ grappler, that just lessens his chance of victory, even though he still probably could survive and grind out a win. He'll keep this one standing. He'll outpoint Wilson Hayes quite clearly. Hayes will go for the takedowns, look to take this to the mat, but will be very, very unsuccessful, I suspect. Cejudo by 30-27 win. That is my pick. Maybe a late TKO. I don't quite see it. Definitely not confident enough to pick it, but maybe a 10-8 in there. So never know. But 30-27 for sure. Henry Cejudo is what I'm going with. Co-main event time. Neil Magny and Rafael dos Anjos, the former UFC lightweight champion, at welterweight. Pretty entertaining fight on paper anyways. Hopefully it does play out entertaining. Jed, Magny, or RDA?
We are dragging on a little bit, so I'm going to be extremely quick with my breakdown here. I'm picking RDA. I think it's a fairly straightforward fight. Neil Magny excels when he can control the wrestling, particularly when he can get on top. I don't think he can do it against RDA here. He has big physical advantages because he's a really tall, lanky welterweight, and he's a pretty good guy. Like, I honestly think Neil Magny's a little underrated, but I don't see – it seems like a really bad style matchup for him. RDA excels at the pressure game. That is I know he doesn't work with King's MMA anymore, but still that same style, and I think that game translates really effectively here against Neil Magny. He's going to be in his face. He's going to be kicking the shit out of him, body and legs, working combinations, pressuring him, getting him up against the fence, working more combinations, working the body, hitting takedowns. Neil Magny just doesn't have the footwork or the offensive dynamism to back him up. I just don't see how he doesn't get back against the fence. And once he's against the fence, I don't see how he's going to be particularly effective here. I think Dos Anjos, if he really focused on a leg game, like a leg attack, he could beat up Neil Magny, maybe get a stoppage. I mostly think Neil Magny's tough enough to survive. Excellently, like an incredible conditioned athlete. Neil Magny is. I just went real Mike Goldberg on you, so I'm going to end it there. But yeah, give me RDA on points.
Yeah, Neil Magny might be, in my opinion, the most conditioned welterweight there is in the division. I feel like he's always ready to go. He could go a full 25 minutes if he could. But I'll make my pretty much discussion quick on this one as well, because I feel like it's going to go one way. I think that Neil Magny's a slow starter. We've always seen that. Lorenz Larkin was able to capitalize on that. Fighters that are pretty decent technically on the feet are able to capitalize with forward pressure early on and take advantage of Magny's weakness kind of on the early beginning of the fight. I think RDA can do that, maybe be able to pick up a stoppage early. If that doesn't happen, I think he'll take the first round. I think RDA will be smart enough and technical to take that second round. And then I'm going to give Magny round 3. I think that his conditioning is going to be a little bit better than RDA. Maybe not, and RDA kind of loses his technicality a little bit, and Magny pops off the jab like he's really good at. And I think the decision is going to be RDA 29-28 across the board. That's kind of the most likely outcome, I think, of this fight, just based off how they both perform in their fights. But I do think that Rafael dos Anjos is going to be able to get the victory here, but either an early TKO or a unanimous decision by a 29-28, maybe not a 30-27.
I wasn't super impressed with RDA's win in his welterweight debut against Tarek Safdien. I don't think Safdien's really, even though he still might be top 15, I think he's far from that nowadays. That was, it wasn't nearly as fun as some people were thinking, and it was a bit lackluster. I hope RDA can do what RDA does and put on quite a clinic on the feet and maybe even on the mat and put on a show. Because he didn't, he just looked a bit off. I don't know why or how or how to even explain it, but he didn't look quite himself in his welterweight debut. He certainly hasn't made the impression on me that Donald Cerrone made, where I'm not going on saying, oh, RDA looks so much better at welterweight. That's just not the case for me. Donald Cerrone, on the other hand, when he did move up, he looked incredible up until, of course, meeting Masvidal and then Lawler. RDA, though, is the pick. I think he's able to get the job done against Magny. Magny's much bigger, and this is key. Magny uses his size in general pretty well. He's able to outpoint many guys on the feet that are sometimes better strikers than him, even, and getting it to the ground. I think I won't be shocked if Magny's able to outpoint RDA a little bit on the feet and then find himself on top of RDA, where RDA is just too small and Magny's too strong for RDA to get back up. We could see a late TKO, but I think Dos Anjos technically is better. I think he's able to outpoint Magny. I think he can chop Magny down. I think in this case, the size disadvantage will allow or RDA to chop Magny down with short punches, get inside the clinch a little bit. Magny or RDA, when he's on, is one of the best in the world. He still is, even though he lost to Alvarez, lost the title to Alvarez a year or so ago, and then followed that up with a decision to Tony Ferguson, a decision loss, that is. I think I still see RDA doing big things. I think he's able to chop Magny down, and I think he could have the potential of taking him down late as well. This is one that could go back and forth a little bit, but I think mostly it'll be straightforward for RDA. I think he'll just have the higher output, a bit more offense. Magny will never quite be able to get going. RDA by decision, either 30-27 or 29-28 is the pick. All right, main event time. Not Demetrius Johnson versus Ray Borg, unfortunately, but we still got a title fight. Women's Bantamweight Championship is on the line when champion Amanda the Lioness Nunes defends her title for the second time, following a knockout over Ronda Rousey against Valentina Shevchenko. Shevchenko might just be the best women's bantamweight on the planet. We will find out come later tonight. Jed, you are super high on Shevchenko. I am as well. Are you picking her to defeat the champ, Amanda Nunes, to become the, let's see, fourth? Is that right? Yeah, fourth UFC Women's Bantamweight champion.
That would be 5.
Is that 5? Yes, 5.
Rousey, Holm,
yes.
Tate, Nunes, 4. So this is 5.
You are correct. You are the mathematician. Who gets the job done? And Amanda Nunes and Still, or Shevchenko and New?
You are right. I am high on Valentina Shevchenko. I'm going to be picking it here, though I will say the longer this fight has been brewing, the more I feel not as good about it. I guess the less good I feel about the pick. But I have basically been riding shotgun in the Valentina Shevchenko bandwagon for the last 3 years. So it'd be a heck of a thing for me to abandon ship at this moment in time. I think Valentina Shevchenko is unquestionably, in my mind, the best women's flyweight in the world. And now that division is opened up, if she loses here, if she loses to Nunes, I would expect her to instantaneously drop down and take the title off whoever the fuck comes off that season of Tough, because holy shit, I love Roxanne Modafferi. I think she's a wonderful human being. For her to be the favorite to hold the women's UFC title is nuts, and Valentina Shevchenko would do really unspeakably bad things to Roxy. So I think she's the best flyweight on the planet. I think she might very well be. You know what? I think she is the best bantamweight on the planet, and she gets a chance to prove it here. We've talked about this fight. We broke it down once before, and then it didn't happen. I think Shevchenko is going to win here, but she has to play a pretty dangerous game to get it done. Nunes has more offensive potency. She's a uniquely powerful hitter as far as the division goes. On top, she is hellacious, and she's a decent wrestler to get things there as well. The knock on Nunes has been her cardio. She claims to have fixed that. I don't know that it's an issue that actually gets fixed, because, the way for her to – the reason she is such an effective power puncher is she can throw so hard into the punches, and it's not really something you can out cardio. You can't just cardio yourself to the point where you can bomb for infinitely. So I think that her gas tank is finite, and Shevchenko's gas tank is not, because she is a cleaner, more technical striker. She puts less in it. She is a classier striker all around. She just doesn't have that same sort of pop that Nunes does. I basically see this fight going similar to their first one, only a little easier for Shevchenko, because she's had She had the 15 minutes to adjust to Nunes. I know both women have improved significantly, but basically I think Nunes isn't going to bring a whole lot different to the table. And we saw that as the rounds progressed, not only did Shevchenko have more success because Nunes was getting tired, I think she also just had more success because she sort of figured out what was going on, sort of figure the timing, the triggers that Amanda Nunes was using, and how to respond to those more effectively. And by 10 minutes, Nunes was gassed, and then Shevchenko was able to just start really opening up. Shevchenko has always been a bit of a slow starter. I expect her to start a little less slow here because they've had the time in, because she's been preparing for this fight forever now, it seems. I think Nunes is going to come out and win the first round, and it's going to depend a lot to me on how much Nunes can do. Because the first round against Shevchenko, she put in a lot of work there, did a lot of damage. She needs to have another round like that. She needs to get Shevchenko down or land something big on the feet. I think the opportunity for her to land something big on the feet is pretty minimal. I think Shevchenko is really good at not taking clean shots on the feet for the most part, and working a counter game. I think the other avenue to success here for Nunes would be to play onto the fact that she is more active than Shevchenko and not try and knock her out. If Nunes comes out and just tries to outpoint Shevchenko on the feet, I think she can maybe have a lot of success doing that, because Shevchenko really is a almost pure counter striker. She doesn't like to lead a ton. And so Nunes might be able to win some rounds just on the fact that like Shevchenko's not going to throw a lot, and Nunes can maybe use that extra length and work some jabs or body kicks and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think Shevchenko just is a more skilled fighter. If Shevchenko puts in body work early, especially, I think that's really going to sap Nunes. And by the late rounds, we could maybe be talking Shevchenko getting a stoppage. But ultimately, I think Nunes is going to win the first round. The second round is going to be competitive. Maybe Nunes wins the second. And I think Shevchenko takes the last three, maybe four. So I've got Shevchenko winning a 48-47, maybe a 49-46 decision, depending on how quickly Nunes tries to come out and get the finish and how quick Shevchenko starts. Those two are the factors there. But either way, 3 rounds certainly for Shevchenko in the book. Give me the bullet for the win. Also, one last thing. I just saw this today for the first time. Go check Valentina Shevchenko's Instagram. She posted some ad where she's sponsored by some cola company. I don't give a shit about that. But in that, there's a hat with her like personal logo on it, which is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in the world. So, because she is Valentina Bullet Shevchenko. It's a bullet, but it's the letter S in the shape of a bullet. It's fucking incredible. And if for no other reason other than that, I would support Valentina Shevchenko.
I like that. I don't want to really talk too much on this fight just because I feel like you covered most of it. And we've also talked about this before, pretty similar to the last time we did talk about it. My initial pick was Valentina Shevchenko by a 4th round knockout. And I'm going to stick with that just for pretty much the same reasons that I did with the first fight, but also talking about the last fight that happened between these two. So this is the rematch, of course. I think that what's going to happen is, of course, Nunes is going to be the faster starter. She puts together quite a bit of power strikes. But when I look back on that first fight, I remember Shevchenko getting taken down in the second round, not in the first. And in the second round, Nunes was very good at landing some heavy ground and pound. And she utilized that pretty much throughout the entire second round, took pretty much like a 10-8. And Shevchenko didn't really have a lot of activity off her back, so it seemed like that's where she struggled. The first round, however, and you might have mentioned it, Jed, but Nunes, she throws a lot of power there early in the first round on the feet, but Shevchenko is pretty good at defending a lot of the punches, and I feel like she was able to land a couple counters there of her own early on. That third round, Nunes had pretty much expanded a whole lot of energy to where the point she just couldn't really land anything. And Shevchenko was the one putting together better punches and started to take over the fight. A lot of Nunes' losses, too, have also come in later rounds. She has, of course, lost a majority of the decision fights in her career. I'm actually trying to pull it up as we speak just so I can check it out. But just to take a look at it, her second UFC or second loss, she lost by in the second round, very late in the second round. Her third loss came by decision. Her fourth loss came to Kat Zingano in the third round. And in the Shevchenko fight, she started to fade late in that fight as well. Almost all of her fights, she gets stoppage early on, or that's pretty much it. She gets a couple submissions here and there. The only fight that she did win a decision was the fight with Shevchenko, where Shevchenko started to take over late in that fight. I think that with this being 5 rounds, I don't think Nunes is going to have the ability to win a decision. I just don't see that really happening. I think if anybody's going to win a decision in a 5-round fight, it's going to be Shevchenko between these two. Nunes has the ability to get a stoppage early, but I think it's only going to come if she can get the fight down and land some ground and pound, and somehow she's able to connect one good one that knocks Shevchenko out, or at least impresses whoever the judge is tonight, or the referee, excuse me. But I think that Shevchenko, over time, she's got the conditioning, the technicality, and the abilities to win this fight if it gets past the 2nd round, and Nunes has exerted a lot of energy. For that reason, I'm going to be taking Shevchenko. I've got her picked by a 4th-round knockout, just like I did in the first fight, and I think she's going to be the new UFC bantamweight champion.
Well, I got Valentina Shevchenko here as well. Hate to keep it boring for you guys, but I think Shevchenko becomes the new champ tonight. Amanda Nunes is really, really good. She's a great fighter. She has submission skills. She, of course, has brutal knockout power. But Valentina Shevchenko, I think, is much more technical than her. And as weird as it sounds, because everybody's saying it, and you got to think how big of a factor is this? But the fact that this is 5 rounds is really almost everything. Shevchenko will not win the first round. Nunes starts incredibly fast, and then she slows down. It's basically vice versa for Shevchenko. She's not a super slow starter, but she's not a fast starter, very far from it. But she does her best work later on in the fights, and especially against the fighter. You know, when a sort of a slow starter fights a fast starter, well, it's going to end one of 2 ways. And in this case, I think it'll be the slow starter that gets the job done. I think Shevchenko can weather the storm. I think she can do well late. I think, Jed was spot on. I think Nunes will win the first round for sure. I think the second round will be close. It really comes down to, does Nunes gas herself out in the first round and not really know what she's doing? Probably not. But Shevchenko, it also depends when she starts going. So, she could win that round, Shevchenko, that is, but I would lean towards Nunes, just like the first fight in March of 2016. But then the 3rd and 4th and 5th rounds are all going to be Shevchenko's. I would be pretty surprised if Nunes is able to beat Shevchenko by decision. Obviously, she could knock Shevchenko out. She has that potential. There is that chance. But if Nunes wins by decision, I would be legitimately shocked. I just don't see it happening. Round-wise, I don't know how Nunes can win later rounds against a fighter like Valentina Shevchenko. I just don't see it happening. Shevchenko, she kind of has more ways to win in the sense that she might be a more technical fighter. She certainly doesn't have the power, but she might be a bit more crisp on the feet. And then on the mat, she's really good at submissions as well. Both fighters are really well-rounded, and I know Joe Rogan has been saying it. I know Jed has said it himself. This is probably the best women's MMA fight we've seen, and I think that this is probably the best one we'll see in a while, unless Valentina versus Joanna happens at 125. I think right now that's the best women's fight you can make, even counting Holly Holm or Cyborg or whoever, or Joanna, of course, with that. I think this is the second best. I think Joanna Valentina is the best. Technical fight. This will be really fun fights. It will be, the tale of 2 fights. Nunes does well early. Valentina does well late. It just depends when Nunes starts to fade and when Shevchenko starts to take over. I think that happens sooner than the 3rd round. I like Valentina and Shevchenko here by decision. I don't agree with Shevchenko by finish, but I could see it happening if Nunes fades that badly. I mean, have we ever seen Nunes go 5 rounds? My first reaction, no, I didn't think so. So, I mean, if Nunes is literally barely keeping herself standing come the 5th round, sure, Shevchenko could either knock her out or take her down and tap her out. That's possible. I don't see it happening. I like her by decision. That is my pick. Valentina Shevchenko by 48-47, unanimous decision. Pretty similar to the first fight, but of course, 2 extra rounds will be championship it'll change that. It'll change who the champ is. So Valentina Shevchenko and new decision is my pick. That does it for UFC 215. Let's move on to our post-fight bonuses, then DraftKings, and then that'll be it. Wes Riddle, who do you got for fight of the night and performances of the night?
I'm going to give my fight of the night to not the main event in this one. I definitely think the main could be, but I'm giving my fight of the night to Jeremy Stephens and Gilbert Melendez. I feel like they could put on a pretty exciting show. My two performances, I'm going to give one to Valentina Shevchenko. I do think that she has the abilities, if Amanda Nunes fades late, to get a performance of the night. And usually any kind of fighter that wins by stoppage in a main event that is a champion or at least contending for the belt, or especially, going up against the champion, I think they're definitely going to be able to get a performance of the night for finishing a champion. So I think she might be a lock if she can get a finish. And then my second is to Tyson Pedro.
And Jed?
You know me, I'm always picking 5-rounders for fight of the night unless I have a really compelling reason not to. This just also so happens that this 5-rounder is, as we established, in my opinion, the second best fight you can put together in women's mixed martial arts right now. So that is easily going to be my fight of the night prediction, not even close. Performances is a lot more difficult, particularly because a lot of these, I think actually all of these fights I'm picking by decision, really. Maybe some late stoppages, but not like performance of the night showcases. So much harder for me to determine. I like Wes's pick of a Shevchenko as far as a performance bonus, but I'm not going to do it because she is going to get to fight of the night. So instead, I think one guy I picked to have, I guess one of maybe the only guy I picked to have really a sensational kind of highlight reel was Adriano Martins on the opener. I think he's going to knock out Cajun Johnson. So I guess I'm going to throw Martins in my performance of the night bonus for getting a exciting KO. And then I'm debating whether I think Sarah McMahon gets a submission over Ketlin Vieira. I'm going to assume that she doesn't. That could be wrong. If she does get a submission, I'll eat my words there. But I'm going to go the opposite end of what Wes did. I'm going to take Ilir Latifi. He hits really hard. Tyson Pedro, really defensively bad, leaves his chin out there. I'm going to say Ilir Latifi just throws a bomb and gets a big-time win and extra $50K for it. Nicholas, what about you, sir?
Well, fight of the night is easy for me. I like Stephens Melendez. Nunes Shevchenko is a good pick, but my money goes to Stephens Melendez. But performances of the night.
I'm so glad you guys are just giving me fight of the night picks. I'm so excited you guys are just handing me that on a platter. I thought you guys would copy me, but it's exciting to know I'm getting at least one win tonight.
Performances, though, on the other hand, is incredibly tricky. I like Jed and probably like Wes. I don't have his predictions right in front of me, but a lot of these fights I have going to the judges. All 5 main card fights I have going to the judges. Although Cejudo could finish the main event, we could see a finish. Even Stephens Melendez, we could see a finish. Latifi, Pedro, probably more likely than any of them. But I have them all going to judges, so it's tough for me to give a performance there. Then we have to go to the prelims, and the prelims aren't terrible; they're not great. McMahon, I have going to the judges. Tucker, Clark. So the 3 finishes on this card, I have Ashley Evans Smith, who if she gets a performance of the night bonus here, that's really, really terrible. And then I have Bular, who probably coasts to a decision, maybe. And then I have Adriano Martins. So one goes to Adriano Martins for sure, because he's the one fighter who's going to get a clean finish here, a really impressive finish here. And keep in mind that 2 hours ago I didn't think Martins would be finishing, so that says something about this card and how often we're going to see finishes. I'm going to give my other one to Henry Cejudo because I just can't give one to Ashley Evans Smith. Sorry, Ashley Evans Smith, but I just cannot give Ashley Evans Smith the performance of the night bonus, even though I think she's one of the 3 fighters who gets to finish on this card. So I'm, putting my money on Cejudo. I had him by decision, but I think he has potential to finish as well. So Cejudo, Martins, Stephens, Melendez will be $50K richer plus their Reebok money and their actual paydays. So that'll be cool. DraftKings, let's move on. Jed, 6 fighters on your DraftKings team. Who do you got?
This was a tough DraftKings for me because there were a couple of lineup options I really liked here. But I've come to a decision. I've come to a conclusion here that I'm I'm pretty happy with. I gotta say, I'm a little afraid that if I give it out, you guys are just gonna immediately copy it and then pretend like you did it on your own.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to say this now. I'm pretty sure he's saying that because I already posted my picks for DraftKings before.
Oh, I didn't
anybody.
even. You did, but I didn't. I honestly didn't even look at your picks. So
All right.
I'm actually interested to see if we've come there.
So mine are already shared, but we'll see what happens.
I think I'm safe though, because I believe that you guys are going to have at least one inclusion on your teams that I'm not going to, because you both picked Tyson Pedro and he's pretty cheap. So I imagine that that's a pick that y'all make here. But my DraftKings team is, and like I said, I'm feeling pretty good about it. So I've got Arjan Bular, $7,900. Like I said, I think there's no way he loses this fight to Luis Enrique, barring some type of pre-fight jitters. The fact that he's under $8,000 and has such a clear advantage and clear ways to win is astonishing to me. Also, on top of that, I think he's going to take Luis Enrique down a bunch too. And you get a lot of points for takedown. So Arjan Bular, a great inclusion. And since he's cheap, he lets me get some more expensive guys like Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo, I think he's going to win all 3 rounds. I think he's going to score some takedowns. I do think he'll work a takedown game on Wilson Hayes. I don't think he'll stay on the ground, but I think he'll pick up a couple takedowns and just outpoint him. If you look at his scores, he has the scores that aren't that, like, he's always putting up good numbers, except for his losses are obviously didn't have great points against Demetrius Johnson, and he still put up like 50 points against Joseph Benavidez despite not getting the 30-point win bonus that he should have gotten. So that's, still another 80-point showing. I think Cejudo is a great inclusion, even at the cost of $9,100. Rafael Dos Anjos, like I said, I think he's picking up a pretty clear-cut decision over Neil Magny, which will include takedowns and a lot of strikes. He works at a good high pace. All of his wins, he has good points in, and I think he's going to win, so I like that. Sarah McMahon, the second priciest person on my team at $8,900, but I think she's going to work down a lot of takedowns on Ketlin Vieira, and that's going to be a lot of points. She might get a late sub, so I like her as an inclusion. Valentina Shevchenko, $8,100, right at the kind of even money line for where fights go. These are fighters go in these sort of things. I think Nunes is also 8,100. If you think Nunes is going to win, you should put Nunes on your team. If you think Shevchenko is going to win, put her on your team, because they're competing for 5 rounds. So much more time to score points, to rack up those significant strikes, takedowns, things like that. And then rounding out my team, I was pretty surprised that Mitch Clark was he's not a betting favorite at all, but he is a enormous favorite in DraftKings. White is $7,400. I think he's the betting favorite, and I think he's going to win this fight. So he ties in all my things together, and I think he's going to put up at least 50 points for a win. So Alex White rounds out my team. What about you fellas?
Wes, go.
So we've got 3 of the same. And the biggest one, I'm taking 3 risks, more so 2, I think, but 3 big risks on my DraftKings team. I've got Valentina Shevchenko. I think that she might be able to squeeze out a victory there, especially in a 5-round fight. But I agree with Jed. I think that having one of those 2 on your team is a good call. My biggest risk is Tyson Pedro. I have him put on there. I think that when there's 2 fighters who have a chance to get a knockout, I feel like it might just be a risk to throw it on there, of course. But it's better to have somebody on there that could get a knockout and that has a definite chance to get a knockout than somebody that might just get a decision. That it's a little bit of a risk, but I'm going to throw him on there. I've got Gilbert Melendez. I think Gilbert is going to be able to get a decision here, a pretty clean-cut one over Jeremy Stephens, but I feel like it could be close depending on Jeremy Stephens' activity. Then my 3 definites, I'm very confident in all 3 of these. I've got Henry Cejudo, one that we match on. I've got Arjan Bular, one that we also match on, but then one that you didn't have on your team that I knew is a fighter that I'm pretty sure is going to get a victory here is Adriano Martins. I had to have him on my team. I think that Martins is going to be able to stop Cajun Johnson there in the first or second round.
Oh, so Jed, I thought you had Martins, but you did not?
No, I didn't. I originally had started – when I started building my team, Martins was going to be on it just because he's the one guy I was confidently predicting to get a stoppage, but he's really expensive. And basically, Sarah McMahon cost $8,900 and Martins cost $9,000. But I have $0 left with Sarah McMahon. If I had an extra $100, I would have Martins over McMahon, but I don't. So I don't. That's how it went.
All right. Okay, so my team, so we all have 3 of the same fighters. We all have Arjan Bular, we all have RDA, and we all have Valentin Shevchenko.
I do not have RDA.
Oh, okay, so I misheard. So we all have 2 fighters the same, I guess, Shevchenko and Bular. So we're all on both of them.
We're all on those.
My other 4 are Rafael dos Anjos, Adriano Martins, Gavin Tucker, and Tyson Pedro.
So yeah, so you and Wes are running the same team essentially, but you have RDA and Tucker, and he has Melendez and Cejudo. Frankly, I like his team better than yours.
Yeah, hold on. So the differences are RDA and Tucker.
Yeah, you both have Bular, Shevchenko, Pedro, and Martins. He has Melendez and Cejudo. You have RDA and Tucker. I like RDA, but. I mean,
I kind of like Wes is there too. I might need to rework this a little bit.
Cejudo is clearly better than RDA in my opinion as far as those go.
Yeah.
And like Tucker and Melendez, I also think Melendez is probably better than Tucker.
Well,
Melendez is a bit of a risk.
I think Tucker's better, but
probably. Melendez is a bit of a risk, but I think they're probably both going to end up around the same points. It's true. Melendez is a bit of a risk. That's true.
While we do our outros and say goodbye to the people, I might look at reworking this a little bit. And well, I mean, initially, my first before these 2, I had instead of Bular and Martins, I had Stevens and Ashley Evans Smith.
Oh goddamn!
You just did go back to that. Did you? Go back to that.
Yeah, go back to that.
Do you guys just want to easily win or something? I guess so. Anyways, we are out.
Win. There's no question.
I will. I might look at reworking this while we say goodbye, and if I do, I will let you know. Anyways, Jed, let everybody know where they can find you on social media, where they can find your writing, anything else you got to plug.
I'm on Twitter at Jed K. Meshew. Follow me there. I write words at MMAfighting.com. You should go read MMAfighting.com all the time. One last thing I will plug. As you guys know, being 2 of you, not the rest of the listeners, I am running a marathon November 4th. I'm running for St. Jude's Children's Hospital. It's my first marathon, but it's a really good cause. So I am raising money for that. I know particularly at the current point in time, there are a lot of great causes to give money to. I don't begrudge you for donating to Hurricane Harvey or Hurricane Irma or anything like that. But if you would like to, if you can spare any amount of money at all, go to my Twitter page. It is linked. The very first, my pinned tweet is linked to where you can donate money. Any amount always helps. St. Jude's Children's Hospital is a fantastic cause, helping children with cancer. So I'm not sure there's few things that are as universally accepted to be a good cause as children with cancer. So if you can, I would be very happy for anything you can share. Just trying to help some kids out. Other than that, it has been a joy and a privilege and a pleasure, gentlemen, and I will see you next week.
All right. So I made one change, and it is no longer RDA. So Jed, get ready. I am changing Rafael dos Anjos to McMahon.
Okay. Well, now we at least have some overlap. Interesting. I like it. I
like that. I'll go ahead and wrap myself up now. I'm glad to be back on the show. First off to say, I'm glad I can join my fellows back here. Appreciate being back on and having some support throughout the past couple weeks. My Twitter is at allthatmma. I do all my social media communication over there. If you ever want to reach out to me, feel free through that. And then you can also find my writing, which I haven't done a whole lot of now because I've been back at school, over at MMAsucker.com. I haven't wrote in probably about a month now, and I feel kind of bad for that. But I'm hopefully going to be able to find some time for it to be able to pop back on and try to write a little bit. But school's taking up a lot of my time. I've got 5 classes, a lab, and actually 6 classes in a lab. So plus an a cappella group that I'm in. So it's quite a bit on me, but I'm going to try to be able to have some free time here and there if possible. Besides that, I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and always have a lot of fun talking fights.
I think you and your acapella group should try out for something like America's Got Talent.
We could, but I don't know if we're that good.
No? Well, you could find out.
We could if we actually tried, but we're a group that doesn't really try. We just kind of put it together an hour before.
Hour before a huge performance. All right, I'll give that to you. Anyways, you guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find my writing over at bloodyelbow.com. You can find my other podcasts. I host it sometimes with Andrew Lawrence, sometimes with Jed Meshew, sometimes even with Wes Riddle. Last week we had on Carlin Bardsley. Carlin had not been on the program for almost a year. I pulled him out of the grave to talk some fights, even though he does very little in MMA, and that actually means nothing in MMA nowadays. So we had Jesse Arnett, we had Kyoji Haraguchi, and we had Ben Sargent on the program. So go check out those interviews. Jesse Arnett fights tonight. Kyoji Haraguchi, you know who he is, of course. So go check out that. That was episode 127. You can find, as I said, my writing over bloodyelbow.com. I just posted an interview article with Jesse Arnett. He talked about how he turned down 2 offers from the UFC because they were short notice and up a weight. Sounds like, well, he was supposed to be signed to the UFC apparently after his last win. That changed, and now it sounds like he'll be signed should he beat Johnny Bedford tonight. So we'll see if that does come to be true. I will also be doing some local MMA coverage now for MMA Sucka. I wrote for MMA Sucka for over a year and a half or so before the Bloody Elbow gig. I'm going back just to do a bit of local MMA stuff, so mostly on their YouTube channel. So look out for that as well. That is it. Thank you guys for watching. We do appreciate it. For Wes Riddle, Jed Meshew, I am Nick Baldwin. Good night. Goodbye, not good night, and enjoy the fights.
Love you guys.